Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a wrap-up. It's not a wrap-up for any specific month. I went out of town at the end of August and I was supposed to have Wi-Fi on my trip. I was out of town for about a week and I didn't have Wi-Fi. I had basically zero reception and it was a great trip, but I did get behind on my work. And then I shared in a community tab post, I won't go super into details about this, but I was experiencing some struggles with some mental health stuff, which by the way, thank you so much for all of the kindness that so many of you, all the nice messages. Between those two things, I got a little bit behind in general. And so it's been a while since I've sat down and done a formal wrap up, which means there's going to be a lot of books to go through in this video. I'm going to kind of try to go through them pretty quick. It's just going to be kind of an overview of here's what the book's about, here are my thoughts. The first four that I'm going to mention were DNFs, so I'm going to start with those. And none of these books I thought were terrible or anything. I actually have gone in depth about why I DNF them in a specific video about DNFs and an unhaul. But those four books would be Fable, The Queen's Rising, The Jasmine Throne, and Half Stick of Shadows. So The Jasmine Throne and Half Stick of Shadows were adult fantasy. They were two of my anticipated releases from this year. Half Stick of Shadows was a King Arthur retelling from the Lady of Shalot's perspective. It was much more thematic than I think I was anticipating, but I didn't actually think it was bad. I know a lot of people haven't really been enjoying that one, and I think it's just one of those books where if you're not connecting to the themes, then you're probably not going to find yourself all that invested in it. It reminded me in some ways of the book The Kingdom of Back, which I loved, but a lot of people don't love The Kingdom of Back and they don't relate to it the way that I did, and this one sort of reminded me of that as well. The Jasmine Throne is a new book in a fantasy series, and it's the first installment. I thought that the world was really interesting, the characters were interesting, it was so unique. It was very different from a lot that I've picked up, but I found that I often felt like I was a little bit behind, and then I couldn't be as emotionally invested, or the stakes didn't feel as high because I never really felt like I had my feet on the ground, we'll say. So the magic is very mysterious, and also we sort of have some mysterious aspects to certain characters' backstories, and I think that's part of the intrigue of the story, is that you're sort of discovering more about the character, and then you're discovering more about the magic. I didn't quite feel the edge of your seat sort of feeling that I was hoping to feel because I didn't always know what was going on. I think a lot of people are going to like that about the book, and they're going to like the discovery aspect, and a lot of times I do like that, but for this particular one, I just wished that I had a little bit more information. Queen's Rising and Fable are both YA books. Fable follows a character who has sort of been placed on this island. She's trying to fend for herself. She's trying to get on a ship to escape this island, and there's something going on with her father, and she's trying to get back to her father. And it seems like they have a very kind of morbid relationship between the two of them. You're discovering more about that as the story progresses. But once again, I mean, this is the case with pretty much every DNF, I just wasn't finding myself connecting to the character or connecting to the story. And then with Queen's Rising, I really enjoyed the beginning. We follow a character who has been placed in this school that only has a handful of students, and these students are meant to learn a specific passion, is what it's called, so a specific skill. Our main character, she seems to more so be at this school not because of some skills that she has, but because her father is an important figure. She doesn't know who that figure is, but she's been accepted into this school, it seems like, for her own safety. The beginning part, the school part, I really liked. I liked the relationships between the characters, and then as the book progressed, it felt like when we sort of shifted away from the school and into more political intrigue, which I normally love, I just didn't feel like there was the connections between characters like there was at the beginning, and they were opportunities for the character to meet new people and develop new relationships, but I think that part of it sort of felt, I don't want to say rushed because it sounds so negative, but it just felt like the connections between these new individuals developed very quickly. Of course, if any of these sound good to you, I still recommend them, even though they didn't work for me. Hopefully they'll work for you. The next couple of books, I did a whole live show with my friend Jessie from the channel Jessie May, and that would be Never Die and Hood. So Jessie and I had a list of books that we were hoping to buddy read this year. At the time that we made the list, Jessie was kind of early on in her pregnancy. And so we had planned on doing live shows for the first couple months and then playing it by ear because she wasn't really mentioning that she was pregnant at the time. And then, you know, she had the baby and she's been a busy mom and stuff. So we did a live show where we talked about these two and one of the other buddy read books. So I'll have it linked. We go super into depth about our thoughts, mostly spoiler free, but then occasionally we go into spoilers, but we put up on the screen spoilers when we do mention them in case you're worried about it. But either way, Hood, as you can guess, is a Robin Hood retelling, and then Never Die is a story that follows. It's actually a really cool setup. So the way I described it is that, you know how in fantasy stories, a lot of times there's a moment when a character is telling you a story that is kind of folklore within that fantasy world. I think that this book felt like if you took the folklore in a fantasy world and then you made it its own book. We follow multiple points of view and a boy who is bringing back people who have died to help him accomplish a mission. Some of the people are already dead and he brings them back, and then other people, he needs them to be killed so then he can bring them back. And the reason that he needs that to happen is so that these people are bound to him. They can't really be bound to him unless they have died and he's brought them back. It's a very quick read. It is super action-packed. It's basically one fight scene after the next, and I'm quite picky when it comes to fight scenes, but I really enjoyed a lot of these. Still though, at the end of the day, I don't necessarily love stories that are that fast-paced and that action-packed, that many fight scenes. So I enjoyed it for what it was, but I don't think it ever was going to really be a favorite just because it's so not my usual. But I will say I really would love if this were turned into a one-season animated show. I think that that would be really entertaining, and then the fight scenes could especially come to life. With Hood, so you know when you're loving a book a lot and you're like, okay, if we just need to maintain this level that we're at. Doesn't even have to get better. I just want it to stay where it's at, and it will be maybe not a new favorite, but possibly. And then also, I'm definitely going to want to keep reading. You know when that happens, and then it doesn't maintain that level, and then things happen where you're like, why is this happening? That's what happened with this book. And as a result, it makes me angrier than I normally would feel if it had been kind of lukewarm throughout. So I don't think the writing in this is poor whatsoever. It's more so historical fiction. There's very little fantastical elements. So again, it's a Robin Hood retelling, and the author seems to have such a vast knowledge of history, so it really feels like you're reading a really accurate depiction of this time period. And the beginning of the story, the character that is kind of the Robin Hood character is so flawed, and there's so much room for this character to grow. And I needed them to grow a little bit more. They drove me up a wall. I was so frustrated with them, and they did something especially irksome basically at the very end where I'm like, all right, there goes all chances of me enjoying you as a character. Which, what I would have really loved is, I know that some people are like, I like the idea of a morally gray Robin Hood, because at the end of the day, is it really better to steal from people in order to help other people? Like, that's, you're still a criminal, right? So I like the idea of, is Robin Hood actually a hero? But I wanted him to be a little different than he was. I wouldn't have even minded if he was morally gray, or more so than he maybe is. It's just the kind of grayness that we get with him, I didn't like. I wouldn't even call it morally gray. I would just say I thought he was lacking in some brain cells. But this author, their ability to make me despise the antagonist, bravo. They did such a good job. And my hatred for this character, one of the characters, it was so strong. And that's why I was so pumped too. About halfway through the book, like I said, I was thinking, oh my gosh, this might be a new favorite. Because I was so ready for this Robin Hood character to take this other character down. But then as the story progressed, I'm like, Can just some random villager do it? Next up, we have a couple of romance books. One would be Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This follows a character who has chronic illness and fibromyalgia, and I loved that about this character. My mom actually has fibromyalgia, and that was something that she struggled with a lot. For a lot of my childhood, I remember her trying to find ways to help with the pain. So I feel bad saying I enjoyed seeing a character with this, but it's just really, I think it's really nice to see characters that are not your typical main characters. And then the love interest in the story is somebody who kind of had a very rough relationship in their past, and both of these characters, they sort of find each other and they're working on themselves while sort of falling in love with one another. The other one was Sweethand. This is also my friend Jess, one of her favorite books. And this was also very fun. Both of these feel like you're watching a fun romantic comedy. I would say the writing is perhaps not as charming as Get a Life, Chloe Brown. It's a little bit more forward, a little bit more basic, I would say, but it feels very real life. If you're wondering what the story is about, it's kind of enemies to lovers, sort of not friends, but they did know each other growing up, and they don't like each other, and they didn't like each other growing up either. So one character, her sister is getting married, and then her sister's fiance, his best man, is this person that she can't stand. So these two characters are kind of forced to work together for their friend/family members getting married. They can't stand each other, but they're doing it for those they love. And our one character is a baker. She has her own business. And then the other character kind of works in the music scene. And you see these two characters they just can't stand each other, but they're both super hot. Switching gears, we have Sky Hunter by Marie Lu. This takes place, it would seem, in the very far future where Earth and society kind of sort of has crumbled, and we're looking at new power that has come into existence. So there's certain groups that seem to be sort of taking control of everything, and there's one particular group of people that is still kind of holding on to their independence. Our main character is not actually from this society, this kind of rebellious group. They're from somewhere else, a group of people that was conquered, but they managed to escape, and now they are a part of this sort of resistance group, but they are looked down upon and sort of treated as other because they're not from this place. So even though they're fighting, because they are sort of in the military of this society, they're fighting for this place, and they love this place because it's provided them an escape, they also are not treated particularly well. The enemies use sort of advancements in something. They don't really know what, but they have managed to control these monsters, and they use those to help them conquer other people. And so what's really fascinating is that these monsters are very aware of sound. So a lot of people actually use sign language to communicate, and our main character, something happened when she was young, so she doesn't even really have the ability to speak, even when these monsters aren't around. I really liked that about this main character. I liked seeing this character find other ways to express themselves, while also being really awesome. They're a really awesome main character. It did move. It's not that long of a book, and I wish it was longer because there was so much to it that I found so fascinating. I still wish it was just a tiny bit longer. Last chunk of books on this list, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I'm sort of doing separate, almost wrap-up style videos for some new releases that have come out this year, and I don't know how many of those videos will be out by the time that I have this wrap-up out, but either way, you're going to see more details about these there. So kicking off the list, we have Iron Widow. I not only have mentioned this in those videos, but also in a reading vlog where I was reading anticipated releases. And this one, I know a lot of people have seen this around. It's described in the marketing as The Handmaid's Tale meets Pacific Rim. So it's very much about a society that mistreats girls, women, while also being very futuristic. It's a combination of there being ancient Chinese history and also really far future sci-fi / fantasy, which I thought was a fascinating blend. And we follow these characters who control these giant robots called chrysalises. They use these giant robots to fight against, they're almost like Transformers, to be honest, but they use these to fight against bad guys, we'll say. Our main character wants revenge against one of the individuals who controls a chrysalis, this particular significant member of the military. She does not care what happens to her. She just wants revenge on behalf of someone she cared about who was hurt by this person. And she is a wrecking ball. She just really bulldozes her way through everything. And this book is just, I think, about rage. Any rage that any person has ever felt because they've been mistreated over something that they shouldn't have been mistreated for. This book, I feel like, is just what if you could actually do something about it? And what if you could do not just something, but a lot? And for me, while I think that that's made it for a very fast-paced, compelling, edge of your seat, you're in for the ride kind of a book, I have said so many times that I really like just sitting with characters in their feelings and their emotions and seeing when they're sad or seeing when they reflect on their loss. And I think that this character is pretty much the opposite of that. Anytime she starts to have some reflection or introspection, or she's thinking back on things, she's kind of like, but you know what? I have things to do. And I respected that. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily make for my favorite kind of story. So similar to how I mentioned with Never Die, what that book is, what it is great for what it is, right? If that makes sense. But it's not necessarily what I love, and I think that that was the case with this one as well. So I don't really think I'll be continuing on with this series, but I understand why so many people are gravitating toward it. Small Favors is a horror fantasy, and I love this one. And it follows a small town where creepy things are happening, and our main character, she and her family are beekeepers. They live off the land, and like I said, creepy things are happening. You have no idea what's going on, and there's a mix of scary, what the heck is happening moments with small town drama, which made for, I thought, just the juiciest of stories. I loved it. I loved it so much. I do not read a ton of horror books, but this is making me want to read more. I also read House of Salt and Sorrows by this author, and if you were kind of lukewarm on that one, I would still say give this one a try. I almost wouldn't even be able to tell it was the same author. House of Salt and Sorrows, I think, utilized a lot of tropes that a lot of us have seen that are so familiar that they're almost cliches, right? Or at least how she wrote them, I could understand why some might feel as if they were cliches. This one, it felt more mature in a way, and it was just, I loved it. I loved it so much. Next up, we have She Who Became the Sun. If you love following morally gray / villainous characters, or you kind of like villain origin story type stories, this is the book for you. I'm going to be doing a whole live show with my patrons and then eventually having that go up here on my channel. And so we're going to go super, super in depth. So I'm going to save most of my thoughts for that. I have mentioned this in one of those new releases videos if you're looking for more information. I greatly enjoyed it. I felt, I didn't think I was going to for a pretty large chunk of the book. And then I finished it and I was like, all right. And then the more I think about it, the more that I really like it. And I'm really excited to see what happens next. But again, not very good people, the people in this story. And we follow characters it's inspired by ancient Chinese history. And we follow different characters who basically are trying to attain their fate. They're doing everything to claim their destiny. And it makes for such compelling decisions, but also not very heroic decisions. They're really not very great people. We also have Defy the Night. This is a YA fantasy that follows two different perspectives. One is a girl who's kind of the people. She's doing what she can to give medicine out to those who need it, of which there are a lot, because that is something that is plaguing this particular kingdom. And then we follow a perspective of someone who is a part of the royalty, who's having to make all the hard decisions when it comes to how much to charge for medicine, how much every individual gets, the amount that royalty gets versus the common people. And then these two their paths cross. And then you see them finding out more about each other and trying to work together for the good of the people. But there really is no easy out in any situation, which I really liked, because there was truly no, here's the answer, here's the thing that will cure everybody. So they have to make tough decisions. And the political intrigue aspects of the story I really, really liked. So in general, Quite liked this one. I will have all of these books linked down below, as well as all of the other videos where I go more in depth with them. Let me know your thoughts on any of these books if you've picked them up. Let me know if you're planning on picking any of them up. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later.